Hello, everybody. This is Carly, Chief Executive of Driving Instructors Association. I've popped on here today because I want to give you a bit of a walkthrough. If you haven't had chance yet to go to gov.uk and read all the stuff about this consultation, on DVSA's consultation, which is designed to look at how do we improve how we book tests in the UK. So basically, this is a consultation where DVSA are inviting the wider public, as well as training professionals and their pupils, to give inputs on what we can do to change the process and make it better and fairer for everybody, as well as try and keep out those nefarious operators that we know are alive and kicking in this system at the moment and making hay whilst the sun shines, being able to scrape up lots of tests and sell them on, either at one end of the market, extremely expensively, ripping pupils off, or in some instances, we're starting to see the emergence of tests being sold too cheaply by some of these outfits, which will only serve to devalue the process of getting a driving license in itself. So let me take you on this brief presentation. We did do this presentation the other night in an episode of Motormouth. You might want to catch up on that episode because it's really insightful. We were lucky enough on that program to have Chris Howes with us, who is a former DVSA examiner trainer. And man, did he have some insights on whether the measures that DVSA are actually taking at the moment are going to be effective in reducing test waiting times, and whether the measures that they are looking to bring in for the future development of how we book tests and deploy them in the UK, whether they're going to be effective as well. So as Chris has retired recently from DVSA, he's got a lot to say on this subject, and he knows the subject very well. So it's interesting. Go and have a look at that when you've got the chance. It's a glimpse behind the curtain of DVSA to see what's really going on over there. However, let's get to the actual point of today's presentation. So, as you can see here, we're going to look at this consultation that's currently running. It started on the 28th of May. It ends on the 23rd of July. The stated goal of the consultation is to make booking a driving test easier and fairer for everyone, whilst preventing excessive charges for learner drivers. However, we are starting to get intelligence at DIA that yes, you've still got those operators who are blatantly ripping people off with charges of up to 400%, over the usual test cost. We're also starting to see people charging very little for these driving tests, flogging them, piling them high and flogging them cheap, which, as I said at the top of this session, is going to critically devalue the value of a test to the end user if they think they can get it so cheaply. So this is a really important consultation. And one of the reasons that we want to break it down for people today is to make sure that you know what it's about, how important it is to have your voice in it, and how you can have your voice in this consultation. So what DVSA have done prior to this particular consultation is they've run what is called a call for evidence. That normally precedes a formal consultation and is a kind of fact-finding mission to see whether we do actually need a whole-scale consultation on this issue. And the conclusion is we do. So they've run this call for evidence from 18th December 2024 to 11th of February 2025, which asks learners, instructors and booking services about their experiences with the current system. So it's really more about how do you feel the system works at the moment? What challenges have you found in it? A fact-finding exercise. The consultation now is more about presenting you with some solutions that they could enact and gauging public opinion of those and user opinion, as in ADIs and pupils. That particular call for evidence resulted in nearly 27,000 responses. So DVSA have just gone through the analysis of all those responses to develop them into proposals for this particular consultation. So what the DVSA data shows is, at the moment, that the high demand for driving tests has changed how people use DVSA online services. So basically, because of the whole driving test waiting time scenario that we've had since lockdown, we've had a change in consumer behaviour. Demand has increased. People have got panicky about that demand and the lack of availability, and it means that they're actually booking their driving test earlier than they would have done in the cycle of learning to drive, putting pressure onto the system and onto those slots, and jumping to go for their driving test far too soon. So things have to be done about that in terms of how it impacts demand and availability in the booking system, but also for the greater good of making sure we don't have people going for a test before they're truly ready, or booking a test before they're truly ready, realizing when the date comes around they're not ready, and just failing to appear for that test and causing a problem of bed blocking, essentially, in the system. So what the data shows that they've got in their hands is that placeholder tests are being booked in locations where learners don't actually intend to take their tests. So in their panic buying, they're not only booking too soon, they're also booking in locations that they don't necessarily intend on going for that test, but they're going to grab that test anyway. Remember the eggs, pasta, and toilet roll scenario of lockdown, people clearing the shelves of product, making sure they've got hold of it, even if they're not even going to use it. So what they're doing is they're taking up these tests in other locations. They might swap them with other people, or they might just turn up and be another FTA for that particular test center. Obviously, we've got a lot of commercial websites who are offering to search for and book tests on behalf of learners, and they cause a huge problem in the system. There's automated tools, i.e. the bots being used to find available slots. So all the users in the system will include genuine ADIs, genuine pupils, genuine mum and dad, and then the online scrape robots that come in and scrape a load of tests at once. And let's face it, they're often cleverer and can beat even government systems. We've also got the problem of tests being resold with extra fees, often costing learners more than double the standard fee. Already spoken about that. And this emerging pattern of also piling it high, flogging it too cheap. This equated to, in terms of the driving test swap issue, 327,000 driving tests being swapped in 2024 alone. And if you can imagine, that amount of activity in swapping tests alone is going to cause a problem within a booking system. And over 29,000 tests were swapped 10 times or more. So that is people rushing to get tests, scooping up a load of tests, realizing they haven't got necessarily the right people in the right place for those tests, and then they're reallocating them or try to reallocate them. There's some genuine need for that happening with larger driving schools who might reallocate tests for genuinely good purposes amongst their pupil population. But a lot of these behaviors are also by pupils themselves and also some of these operators that are not genuine driving schools or pupils trying to book tests. So these practices make it harder for the regulator to offer test slots fairly. And some websites are using software tools to constantly check availability slot, which puts available additional pressure on the booking system. Basically, what that means is you guys are unfortunately having to get up at 6 a.m. On a weekly basis to try and get those, or a fortnightly basis to get those extra slots. But unfortunately for you, the software that is deployed by these companies who are selling online tests is far quicker, far earlier there, and can search in much more multiples more quickly than a human being can. That's where they get to the winning post in terms of getting the most tests quickly. And you sitting back in the queue at number 20,000 have maybe arguably not got a hope in hell of actually getting those tests. So let's look at the proposals. You're being asked for your opinion, and it's really important that you have your say in this on this particular issue. So question 1 in the consultation is who can book a managed driving test? This is all about the who. Option A on question 1 is allowing only learner drivers to book a managed test. In this option, driving instructors will no longer be able to book or manage car driving tests for learners. Instructors can still use the online service to book a managed test to set dates and times when they're available and unavailable to take their pupils to test. And this will stop learners booking a time when their individual instructor is not available. However, there is no real advantage to this particular scenario for an ADI. It's really restricting your access to the booking system. It's putting the power in the pupil's hands. And we know that that's not necessarily a sensible thing to do. If you give learners the choice of the slot and they haven't got an ADI, we then see that behavior of them running around to try and get an ADI for their tests and possibly learning with mum and dad or fewer lessons with whatever available ADI they have, and then maybe taking a break till their tests and then running around again to try and get another ADI. So it promotes all kinds of behaviors that some consumers, the pupils might think is good because it gives them more power and flexibility, but you as professionals know is not a good answer to this problem. So I suspect not many ADIs are going to vote for option A. However, if the industry does not get into this consultation and make its voice heard, and if all of you responded to this consultation, about 42,000 at the moment, and there's no way all 42,000 trainers in the profession are going to respond to this consultation. So if you are such a small number in that, but there are hundreds of thousands of pupils and parents responding to this consultation, there's got to be a balance of ADIs in there making their views known. And one would only hope that DVSA obviously recognises they're going to have hundreds of thousands of pupils able to vote on this particular option and less ADIs, and how do they balance those responses to make sure that the ADI voice is very much heard in this scenario. So option B on question 1 is that both learners and instructors can book, but only learners can make changes. So again, this is putting the power more so into the arguably uneducated learner about when they should make their test, where it should be, what changes they need to make to that test if they don't feel they can make the date or make the location. So in this option, both learners and instructors could book their tests as they do now. Instructors can still use the online service to book and manage tests to set dates and times, but only learners could make changes to booked tests or swap tests. So that's option B. Option C is to keep the current system. In this option, learners can continue to book and manage tests, instructors can continue to book and manage tests for their learners, and businesses that provide learner driver services and employ driving instructors can continue to book and manage tests for learners they are training, i.e. the national franchises. I suspect that ADIs themselves are going to heavily be in favour of option C, because this still gives you the access to both book and change tests, and also allows learners some flexibility, but doesn't allow them to dominate the process as options A and B would. Question 2 is all about how tests can be managed. So this is about the ability to swap tests or change locations. So option A is removing the ability to swap tests or change test locations. In option A, learners could no longer swap tests with someone else. Learners could make 2 changes to their own test dates and times at the same test centre. Learners could not change the location of their test. Learners could still cancel and rebook tests if they need a different location. Option B would limit test swaps and location changes. And within this option, learners could make up to 2 changes or swap their tests in total. For example, 1 change and 1 swap. Tests could only be moved to test centres within certain geographical areas of the original booking to try and negate that tendency that they've seen in the data of just booking a test anywhere in the country with no chance necessarily of them actually turning up for that test if it's hundreds of miles away. Or DVSA can look at adjusting these limits during busy periods if needed. So they can look at ratcheting up and ratcheting down given the demand that they're seeing in the system. Option C is keep current swapping rules and location change rules. So tests could continue to be swapped with no limits. Test dates and times or locations could be changed up to 6 times. Now, when we spoke about all of these changes in the Motormouth special the other week, the majority of people in that particular session, which was about 150 people, were thumbs up for actually keeping the status quo. It's kind of disappointing in a way. I think we all expected that in a consultation, it would be about making moves to a system that actually worked better for ADIs, the main protagonist, supposedly, the licensed professional. We should actually, in many ways, be expecting to control the booking process, and that people should have to go through to actually achieve a test in the first place. Because one of the biggest problems with learning to drive in the UK is we allow people to go full throttle from the moment they get their provisional license to the test centre, whilst having a licensing system simultaneously of professionals with no mandate to necessarily go through those professionals to actually achieve your test standard. So that's a kind of circle that we wanted to square in some way, and maybe some of us thought that there would be another option in these proposals, that you close out the booking system to everybody but ADIs, and you allow ADIs to be that arbiter of whether somebody is ready for their test or not. Now, that may be a radical view to some. I don't personally think it is that radical. I think we should worry less about pupils and parents and the electorate feeling they don't have the civil liberty of booking their test, and worry more about the fact that we don't have the greatest pass rates in the world for our driving tests anymore. We don't have the best road safety record in the novice driver category anymore. The UK has rested on its laurels long enough about that, and other countries do it better than we do because they have a better pre-test learning to drive regime than we do. And we're just really are letting an unfettered rush to the test centre happen in many cases. Now, of course, the data that DVSA will quote is that most people are taking, on average, 40-odd lessons. The reality is there is no strict monitor of that. We are not monitoring every person who comes to the driving test centres across the UK for how many lessons they've had. That kind of data accumulation and not really happening in a sustained, manageable way. If we could do that, that'd be a start in the right direction of understanding how people are learning to drive. But at the moment, it's to do with working as a driving instructor surveys, some other stats they pick up there. But I think we need to get better at getting the metrics of what people are doing out there, who are they using, for how long are they learning to drive. We need to be much more substantial data on this. But if we were to look at a other option, which is only letting ADIs into this system to manage the booking process as the people that the same regulator and agency issues a license to provide driver training in the UK in this category, then maybe that is a better way of gatekeeping when somebody is ready to go to test or not, because then you are trusting the professionals you've given the license for the purpose of delivering this training to make the decision as to whether somebody should go through that next step. Now, of course, there would have to be all kinds of safeguards in that system to stop somebody who is not a professional just rushing people through all the time so they can get that sausage factory churn of volume through their books. There would have to be much better performance measures and monitoring of ADIs. Things like the tip report would become more important, and people who are booking lots and lots of tests and getting people through very quickly, if the results of their pupils were not matching up, or if 6 months down the line there was monitoring of whether that pupil was a safe driver or not pinned against that ADI's performance report, and they didn't seem to be producing a good quality candidate and subsequent driver, then you would probably have to start looking at penalties for those people who are trying to use a system like this as a sausage factory to get great volume through. But we've got to maybe think about the greater number of people would be professional about this, and is that a better safeguard when it comes to acquiring a license in the UK, to know that everybody who wants to go through that process at least has to have an interaction with a driving instructor, a licensed professional driving instructor, to actually get the test books. And maybe there's a required minimum number of lessons that you have to have before you are actually allowed into that system. And actually, that could be another proposal, that we don't actually let people into the driving test system to book a driving test until they've had a minimum number of hours of training with a professional trainer. So that could be something you could do in conjunction with only letting ADIs book the test, or pupils are allowed to book the test, but only if they can prove they've had a minimum required training period with a qualified licensed ADI before they try and book their driving test slot. So those are more radical proposals that, to some degree, disappointingly aren't in this current consultation, but I think that those are things that should be put on the table for future consultation for the greater good of creating safer drivers fit to hold that license and drive independently, which should be our biggest consideration, not whether mum and dad and pupil have a nice experience when they come to a booking system and are allowed to monkey around in that booking system to make sure they get a test when they want it, whether they're ready for that opportunity or not. So that is a very brief walkthrough through that actual presentation. I hope you found that useful in some way. I'll skip back to the main slide there so you can all see what the consultation dates actually are. You will find this information on gov.uk. We've already put the link to it in our newsletters, but if you simply go to Google and type in driving test booking system consultation, Google will find you the result of the gov.uk consultation link. Hit that. You can read all about the consultation, and then you can go through to giving your voice to the consultation as well. In the meantime, if there is anything that you want to share with DIA on this consultation, we will be responding to the consultation formally ourselves as a major stakeholder in this. So if there's things that you think you didn't maybe get across in your response to the consultation, or the consultation process didn't allow you to add more meat to the bones of your answers, then feel free to email those to us at DIA. We're very happy to look at including good ideas, good suggestions, and great feedback from people working at the coalface of driver education in our own consultation response. So that's it from me. Go and have a look at this. Make sure you have your say. Make sure you help shape it. If your consultation response, which I think is likely for many driver training professionals, is no change because the changes you put on the table don't actually look like changes that are going to provide any benefit to us or to wider driver education, then that's what that's the way that you go. But if you see some merit in some of the changes, then that is the choices that you make and the feedback that you make as well. Anyway, we'll catch up when the consultation is done, hopefully. We'll publish our formal response to the consultation to our members, of course, and we'll see what comes out in the wash. Hopefully, a system that works better and is fairer for all, but is very much attuned to something that works towards that goal that we've all got to keep in mind. And I know driver trainers do, which is safer drivers being licensed who can safely drive independently post-test. All right, folks, I'll speak to you soon. Take care then.